I still remember the night it happened. The night they made me feel smaller than I've ever felt. We were all sitting around the dinner table. The overhead light was too bright, casting a sterile glare over everything, like it was trying to illuminate truths better left in shadow. My plate was barely touched. My appetite had vanished hours earlier. The moment I decided I would tell them what I'd been working on for months. "I've decided," I said, my voice trembling, though I tried to keep it steady. "I'm going to start my own indie game studio." The words hung in the air, awkward and unwelcome. My mother blinked at me, twice, like she wasn't sure if she'd heard right. My father leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers over his stomach, exhaling a sharp laugh that was more a weapon than a joke. "You mean making little video games in your bedroom?" he asked, smirking. "For what? 10-year-olds on their phones?" I forced a breath through my lungs. "I've been building something. Worlds, characters. I've been coding for over a year. I've saved enough to—" "You've saved enough to waste time," my father cut in. Across from me, my older brother grinned the way a lion might grin if you told it you were going to outrun it. "This is pathetic," he said. "We already gave you the best advice possible. Get a real job. Stop embarrassing yourself." Their voices crashed over me, each word a confirmation that I was a fool in their eyes. My mother's tone was softer but not kinder. "We care about you, but you're already 26. You think you can make a living off some silly adventure game? People your age have careers, mortgages. You're stuck in some fantasy." That was the worst part, how calm they sounded, as if they weren't tearing something sacred apart. They spoke like executioners who believed they were saving me. It wasn't just my immediate family. Aunts, uncles, the extended constellation of people who'd raised me, had their say in group chats and family gatherings. They described my dream as cute at best, delusional at worst. Even my cousins, younger but already entrenched in safe careers, chuckled in private messages, sending me job listings for insurance work or office administration, alongside emojis that conveyed pity. It was suffocating. Every conversation turned into a lecture, every phone call an intervention. I started avoiding them altogether, because every time they looked at me, they saw a failure already written in stone. But that night, sitting there, something shifted. The plating of their words, casual cruelty dressed as concern, was no longer just cutting me down. It was fueling something raw in me, an unyielding ember in my chest. I didn't say another word during dinner. I just listened, feeling my resolve crystallize with each condescending laugh and each "you'll understand when you're older." When I finally stood, scraping my chair backward, my father asked where I was going. "Away," I said, and I meant it in every possible way. The next morning, I packed. I didn't have much to bring. My laptop, notebooks full of sketches and design plans, a battered hard drive containing prototypes that had become my lifeline. Clothing? Just enough to get by. I moved out of the apartment over my parents' garage, the one I'd rented from them for cheap while I figured things out. They stood in the driveway and watched me load up my rusted hatchback, saying nothing. But I could feel the weight of their silence, thick, suffocating, reinforced with judgment. As I drove away, my father's arms folded across his chest, my mother's eyes downturned. I decided I would no longer give them a partial version of myself. If I was going to fail, I would fail entirely on my terms. What followed? There's no denying it. It was brutal. The first apartment I found was in the kind of building that smelled constantly of mildew and burnt toast. The walls were thin. Arguing couples, crying babies, blaring televisions, it all bled together through the night. The rent was dirt cheap, but it came at the cost of every comfort I'd ever known. I worked part-time at a coffee shop just to afford the basics: beans, rice, electricity. The rest of my hours went into game development, 12, 14 hours at a stretch. Coding until my fingers cramped, sketching concept art until my eyes blurred, recording sound effects using whatever I could find, a creaking door in my apartment, the hum of my fridge, the rain on my window. There were moments I doubted myself so profoundly it physically hurt. I'd wake in the middle of the night, wondering if they were right, that I was ridiculous, that this was all some drawn-out failure in motion. Sometimes I'd imagine my father's scoff, my mother's soft sigh, my brother's smirk, and it would crush me. But more often, it would ignite me. I refused to let their prophecy become reality. I learned. I failed, rebuilt, failed again, learned better. In time, my game began to take shape. A world of sweeping valleys, haunted forests, a protagonist whose journey mirrored my own without my even realizing it. It wasn't just code. It was me. Every screen, every sound, every pixel carried pieces of my stubborn heartbeat. Months blurred into years. The coffee shop job kept my lights on, but every ounce of my potential was poured into that game. I networked in forums, exchanged ideas with other small developers across countries I'd never see. I read everything. Books on narrative design, articles about marketing for indie games, tutorials for animation techniques I never thought I could master. Piece by piece, I sharpened. The launch? I'll never forget clicking the final button to upload the finished game to the marketplace. It was terrifying. I went for a walk afterward. 3 hours just pacing city streets, wondering if it would sink quietly beneath the flood of other games released that week. The first day, sales trickled in. A few dozen copies. Enough to make me grin, but far from sustainable. The second day, a popular streamer discovered it. By the end of the week, the game had exploded online. Memes, threads dissecting lore, fan art, the kind of reaction I'd only dreamed of in those dim coffee shop hours. Within a month, sales numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Emails from publishers poured in. I turned down most offers, wanting to remain independent as long as I could. Instead, I focused on growing my reach, releasing patches, interacting with fans. The game won 2 indie awards, then a major one. A studio offered me a contract to lead a team for a bigger project, along with a financial advance that made the coffee shop feel like some distant alternate lifetime. Money no longer kept me up at night. I upgraded my tech, moved into a place with space enough for a proper office. I even traveled to gaming conventions on the other side of the world, meeting players face to face. Hearing them say my game had changed the way they saw themselves was worth more than any sales figure. But through it all, the shadow of my family's dismissal lingered. No calls came, no congratulations, only occasional vague jabs in group chats, then silence. 3 years after that night at the dinner table, I returned. Not out of spite, not just to prove them wrong. I had built something that mattered, and part of me wanted them to see, not just me. But the truth they had denied. I wasn't the failure they'd imagined. I was living proof that their vision of me had been desperately incomplete. I pulled into the same driveway where I'd stood years earlier, with my hatchback full of hope and fragile determination. This time, I stepped out beside a car they'd never seen, sleek, polished, paid for outright with the kind of confidence they thought I'd never earn. The air felt heavy with memory. But I was different now, stronger. My father was outside, trimming the hedges. He paused when he saw me, his shears hanging loosely at his side. "You're back," he said, more a statement than a welcome. My mother came to the door, wiping her hands on a towel. Her eyes scanned me, searching for something, maybe a sign that I'd finally grown into the mold they'd wanted for me. We sat in the living room. The furniture hadn't changed, but I had. When they asked what I'd been doing all this time, I told them plainly about the game, the awards, the team I now led across 2 continents. The number of downloads, millions. The project slated for release over the next years. The bank account that no longer feared rent day. My brother came in halfway through, muttered something about luck under his breath. I didn't flinch. Then I opened my laptop, the same one I'd carried out of here years ago, and showed them clips, reviews, fan videos with millions of views, footage from the convention stage, my name announced to cheers that rattled the room. My father leaned back, the same posture from that dinner night, but no smirk now. My mother pressed her lips together. My brother avoided my gaze. "You really did it," my mother said finally. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard. "No," I replied, "I'm doing it." Silence pooled in the room. None of their old words could hold in that space anymore. And in that silence, I remembered every night in that mildew apartment, every moment their doubt threatened to crush me, how I had turned it into fuel. I stood ready to leave because I hadn't come back for their approval, only for this moment, a living reminder that dreams don't have to be acceptable to be real. As I walked to my car, I heard my father call after me. "You proved us wrong." I didn't stop, didn't turn around. I just smiled, because proving them wrong had never been the point. Becoming who I knew I could be, that had been the point all along, and I had already done it.